Andrea, if you want to press record and let me know when that's ready.
Yep, we're recording now.
Great. So welcome, everyone. I wanted to get started on time. This is a topic I think is of a lot of interest, and I have a lot to go through. So what I'm going to do is go through this document and another one about Sheets. So this is getting to know Google Docs and Google Sheets. In the chat of your Zoom, if you hover to the bottom of your Zoom window, you should see a bar of icons. You can get to the chat from there, and Andrea has posted the links to both of these documents, so you can have them for your own reference. They're also attached to the calendar invite, and I recommend that you make copies of these for your own use and moving forward. So this is the kind of a list of things I'm going to cover today. And I want to thank Leo Rayner and Andrea Taylor for agreeing to be SMEs on this, and Astrid Terry is out there as well, and she's agreed to be, a subject matter expert. So if there are things that I can't cover, hopefully they'll be able to answer, and if not, we'll try and take it back and get it answered. I also want to thank Diane, Strategic Communications, for managing the logistics and managing, the chat. If you could, we do have a lot of people on, so if you could stay muted and ask your questions through chat, that will allow us to kind of fold them in as we go and make sure that everyone can continue to hear. We are recording this session, so you have colleagues who wanted to join but couldn't, we will be able to get that up. So, and again, the example sheet I'm following right now are attached to the calendar event, but they're also in the chat. So one thing I wanted to throw out to the group, and folks can maybe throw it into chat, are there other topics that people would be interested in covering in future webinars? This is Google Docs and Sheets. I'll talk a little bit about some of the other things that are going on, but in this ability, the spirit of trying to help people do remote work and collaborate remotely, we want to make available some training for people and some opportunity to learn these new tools to help them to be productive. So think about that, maybe add it to the chat if there's topics or other software tools that you want to get to know better. It would be good to hear from you so that we can try to make that happen. So another thing I just want to point out, so my name is Karen Salvini. I'm in the directorate. I am part of the sustainability team, and I am kind of a geek when it comes to Google tools. And I think we're all looking for ways to give back to the community at this point and kind of help our colleagues get through this very difficult time. And I saw this as a way that I could give back and try to help people, adapt to a more remote work environment. So that's why I'm doing it. So just an overview of the topics I'm going to cover. I want to make sure people are aware of the main differences between Microsoft products and Google products. I want to really make sure people know how to get started with Google Docs and Google Sheets, and to figure out how to do, functions if you're used to working in Microsoft and Word and Excel, how to figure out how to use those same functions in the Google environment. And we'll be doing Q&A as we go. Please use the chat for there. If we have time at the end, we'll do some more. And if we come up with other topics that are a little off what I'm covering here, we can certainly consider doing that in a separate webinar. In this document, I want to make sure people had some key links. I'll be going through an example Google Sheet after I talk about Google Docs. And then the IT Help Center. IT has quite a handful of resources about a lot of the software tools that are available. They've also started this remotework.lbl.gov website that has a lot of guidance around getting started with remote work. I wanted to give a shout out to the Google Users Group. If you're interested in getting more involved in the Google tools, this is a Google group of folks who are experts to wanting to learn and pose questions and tips to each other. So that's something anyone at the lab can join. So I wanted to shout out for that. IT has this Zoom training and help. We're all kind of maybe getting a little more familiar with Zoom these days, and there are trainings on there to help you get to know how to be in a Zoom meeting, host one, etc. And then I'm going to be just covering docs and sheets. But obviously these are kind of within the container of Google Drive, Team Drive. There's also like a syncing product called FileStream, and IT is going to be hosting sessions on those this afternoon and tomorrow morning. And you can go to the standard video.lbl.gov website to see that schedule and to sign on to that in a similar way if you were listening to the town hall this morning and last week, similar format. So I'm not going to be going into too much detail on that since IT will be covering that, but I want to make sure everybody was aware of a lot of these other resources to help you learn new tools. So then I'm going to move on to just kind of an overview of the comparison between Microsoft tools and Google. Certainly here at the lab, we don't use SharePoint. We're kind of using Microsoft in sort of a standard file environment. So most of the things you use in Microsoft, whether it's Word or PowerPoint or Excel, you store it on your hard drive, whether it's like a shared G drive or your local laptop or computer. Google files are all stored online. They can be made available offline if you don't have web access, and they can also be set up to sync between the cloud and your computer through something called Drive FileStream. And if you're not familiar with that, I am going to increase the size of my screen.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm sharing my desktop, but I think maybe it might be better if I just share my
the one document.
Just the one, and that might make it a little easier. I was, wanted to kind of demonstrate when you download a document what happens, but I'm just going to have to talk through that. So is this better? Does this look bigger?
It's definitely big. Oh, that's even better.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that feedback. If you don't know Drive FileStream and that's something you're interested in, that should be covered by IT in the sessions I mentioned. So backups, if you're using Microsoft tools, you're responsible for saving and backups and maintaining versions, especially if you're using a local computer. On Google, the document saves automatically as you go. Google handles backups. There's automatic version control, which I'll talk about in a little bit. So sharing, with Google products, you're sharing your stuff maybe via email, or if others have access to the same G drive, you share it that way, but you still have to track like who is the latest version, did somebody edit it? And with Google, you can grant viewer edit access to anyone, within the lab environment, but also outside. You can edit simultaneously, and the link to the document always gives you the latest access to the latest version, so you don't have to worry about that. There are very similar functions. We'll go over that, but there's menus, there's icons, but just know that the location where they are, maybe what they're called, may differ. So just, kind of a primer on getting started, how would you create a file in Drive? So drive.lbl.gov is kind of where I go, and it'll look something like this. You'll right click, you can create from here. There's also this plus sign over here to create a new document, and you're up and running. So that's one way. And this is just a screenshot to help you remember that. Or you can upload an existing file, and you can do that by dragging and dropping from your file structure on your laptop or computer and dragging it directly onto here. Now you may need to go up into your settings and make sure things convert to Google Docs directly if that's what you want. But you can do that, and the most formatting and functions should be retained. Things like macros and scripts, really advanced stuff probably won't be, but your headings, your table of contents, links, and things like that should all translate fairly well. So one of the reasons I want to do this is so that you could kind of follow along and I could work right in the document. So I wanted to next kind of cover navigating sort of a Google file interface. And I'm going to just talk about this in the Google Doc format, but it is quite similar whether using Docs or Sheets or Slides, which is the PowerPoint kind of equivalent. The interface is very similar. So I'm going to go through it here, but just know it'll be kind of similar layout if you're in a different product. So things get saved as you go. I made my screen really big so you can't really see that, but this says basically all changes are saved here, so you don't have to hit save. You don't have to worry if all of a sudden, you know, somebody kicks the power plug off your laptop that you're going to lose your work. You can edit the document title right here. You can see all the people who are in your document, which is kind of nice. And, you know, if you want to, you can click and see where they are in the document. And here's Leo. So if Leo were to start typing something, I would know it was him. I could see what he was doing. Like I said, multiple people can be working on it
Hey,
at
Karen.
the same time. Yes.
Karen, so we got a question about, so you can start a Google Doc from a Word file, correct?
That's right.
And do you lose anything when you do that? Is the formatting lost? You know, what's the conversion? I know you don't know necessarily the process itself, but what's the difference between the Word and the Google Doc when you move it over?
It's pretty similar. And in my experience, if I'm dragging something from, you know, from my file structure to, you know, directly onto here, onto my Google Drive, I've found that almost everything gets retained. Again, I think like if you have very advanced features, sometimes the images might not, but the formatting is all there. You know, if you've got headings, they get retained. If you have table of contents, you know, page numbering, headers and footers, that sort of thing. It's pretty good. And even if you have a track changes document with comments and suggestions and track changes in Word, those all come over. And we'll talk a little bit about what track changes features that Google Docs has.
Cool, thank you.
So, and you can go the other direction. So you can go here to File and Download, and you can take your Google Doc and you can convert it back to Word if you needed to do that. And again, the formatting gets retained, track changes get retained. It's actually quite good. I think it's gotten a lot better. I haven't yet found too much that doesn't completely translate. It may be something like the fonts aren't exactly the right, you know, aren't exact, but you know, there's very little work that I find I need to do when I'm doing that conversion. So one thing that's important to note about Google Docs is where are they? Where do they live? So each Google Doc has an address, basically a URL, and that's this kind of gobbledygook up here. This is the unique identifier, this ID here. As things happen to the document, as you edit it, as you rename it, if you move it or share it, this URL does not change. So if you were to make a new copy of this, obviously that's going to have its new URL. But this particular document, you know, once you share that URL with somebody, it's going to stay the same. And what's nice about that is, again, people always have access to the most up-to-date version. But if you do share the link, you need to make sure people have the appropriate permissions, and we'll talk about that in a bit. So just a screenshot to show you where the URL is, and also where does this live sort of in the Google world. You can click on this folder icon up here in the top next to the file name, and it shows you what folder it's in. You can click on this little kind of pop-out icon, and that will take you right to the location where that file lives. So if you're not really sure, you have a link, but you don't know where this file lives, that's one way. If you need to move it, you can do that here as well. If you're trying to find a file, there's a lot of advanced search features in Drive. So here's a screenshot to show you. I'm just going to bounce over so you can see. You can just start typing, you know, a name here, and it will bring up here. Here's our document for Sheets today. But you've also got advanced search features to look for date or owner or something like that. So I think it's important to know, you know, how to find things, because sometimes you create them quickly and you don't know where they ended up. So a little bit about permissions. I touched on that previously. You can do permissions both where we were before in the list of documents. Right click and do share here. It's the same thing in this document list as it is here in the document. You have this big blue share button. Right now, this is anyone with the link. If you click here, you have the option to give people edit rights or comment rights or view rights. And as long as they have an LDAP, you can type it in here, but you can also share it with people outside the organization. and you would need to put their email in there. There's some complications if, you know, they may need to associate their account with a Google account if they don't already have one, but it actually seems to work pretty well to share outside the organization.
Hey, Karen, if you give a share permission on a document, can you take it back?
Absolutely.
Ooh.
Yeah, absolutely. So you, at any time you can go in and edit permissions. It's not a one-way trip. So you can also assign permissions to a Google group, which is kind of nice because if you have a Google group already, you can just use that, assign the Google group the permissions, and then you can manage who's in the Google group at the Google group level and not have to bother with, you know, each individual person adding them here too. Google groups are great that way. You can add them to a meeting, you know, and you don't have to worry about having to go everywhere and make sure, oh, does this person invite, are they in the doc, etc. So edit obviously is edit permission. So you give that to someone, they can edit this document like you saw Leo do earlier. Comment gives them the opportunity to suggest edits and comment. We'll talk about that in a moment. And view is going to be just being able to see the document and not make any changes to it. There's also some more advanced features if you want to make a document kind of more freely available to anyone with the link. You can drill down and do that as well. Okay, so, you know, like I said, Docs has similar capabilities to Word. You've got your favorite undo and redo controller, Command-Z/Y. That's one of my favorites. Definitely learn the hotkey for that if you don't already. Like I showed you before, you can file and make a copy, and I suggest you may want to do that to these two documents I'm going over today, so you have this for your own use and you can kind of make it your own. Obviously, find and replace. You know, it's what I would suggest when you're in here is just see what's there. You know, to do a little tour around and see what's available in these various menus. The icons, if you hover over them, will tell you not only what they do, but also what the hotkey is for them, if that's available. So, you know, I find that the best way to learn a new product is like, what does it do? What are the options available to me? You can insert images, you can insert links, you can, you know, footnotes, that sort of thing, as you'd expect. One thing that's cool about the links is if you click on it, it not only shows you the name of the link if that's available, but also a little preview. And it kind of basically shows, did I get the link right? You know, so you don't have to click on it and make sure. It's kind of a nice little shortcut. So you have your typical tools like spell check. One thing I like, word and character count, which is underneath tools here. I use that all the time if I need to do an element submission, since they need to be under 300 characters. And then under help is where you can find all your keyboard shortcuts. Like I said, they're often noted in the menus. And here's the shortcut to actually bring up keyboard shortcuts. If you're into that, it's definitely a great way to be a little more productive. So sometimes you might do this by accident because I think there's a hotkey for it, but it's good to know that this icon over here in the top right of your icon bar will allow you to collapse and expand both the menu bar and the icon bar. So sometimes you find yourself here and you're like, what happened to all my icons? What happened to all my menus? I guess the icons are still there. It's good if you're trying to get a little more real estate on your screen, but sometimes you need to get back to those menus. Another cool feature is this clickable document outline. It's right here in the left margin. It's toggle on and off, and basically you turn it on and you've got a clickable table of contents of your document, allow you to navigate it without having to go to the top. And if it's taking up too much room, you can close it. Any questions so far? I know we've been kind of going a little fast, but I just want to make sure that we're not leaving anyone behind.
There's none in chat.
Okay.
I think we're doing too well.
Following along. Okay. So advanced formatting. So headers and footers. These are you know, in Word as well. Easiest way, you can use the menu to get to them, but I find if you just double click in that space, either the top or the bottom of the document, you can just edit. You can add, you know, page numbers and things like that. It's pretty simple to use. Another feature that I think is really helpful is to use the text headings. And the reason is they then feed your table of contents, they feed this sort of sidebar of contents, and allow you to kind of click around through your document a lot easier, and to help format it, because each heading will have a very specific font, and you don't have to go through and make sure that all of your subheadings are bold, 10-point font or 12-point font or something. So it's as easy as selecting the text, going up here, and applying a heading. It's very simple. And of course, there's hotkeys for it. So there's a little screenshot here, because I think this is an important one. You can also add bookmarks if you don't want something at the level of the, to show up in the table of contents, but you still want to be able to link to it. You can do bookmark, and that's under Insert, Bookmark. And I'll put this under Insert, because I think it's good to know where that is. And then all of these, your headings as well as bookmarks, they all have their own URL. And let me demonstrate. If I were to click here, this is a heading here in the next topic I'm going to talk about. And now the URL has added this sort of heading, blah, blah, blah stuff on top. And that tells you this is a direct link to a heading. So if you want to, you have a long document and you want to point somebody to a specific point in the document, you can give them that link, and it will open up the document and then take them to that section. So that's a really nice feature. And bookmarks will do the same thing. If you click on this bookmark, this is a little harder to get it to come up.
So the bookmark has its own link, and so does the text heading?
Correct.
Can you show us again how you did it in the text heading?
Yeah, so basically you just need to be somewhere in the heading.
Okay, so in a heading.
Yeah, so if you've created a heading, you just need to be somewhere in the heading. So if you watch the URL bar up here, if I click away from it, it goes away. And if I click on the text heading, it comes back, which is this extra bit that's added to the name of the, the URL of the document. And this basically says, okay, we'll go to this document and then take me directly to this heading. And bookmarks work the same way. Like if I were to insert it, this is easier if I do it this way. If I insert a bookmark here, what happens now is I add a link, and it will add this bookmark qualifier in the URL bar up here. So it's a similar thing, but bookmarks are just like kind of under the radar. They don't show up in your table of contents, and they don't show up in this sidebar. It's really more kind of for you to, if you want to link to a particular place in the document without kind of elevating it to the level of the heading. Gotcha.
So that you don't have to have the header look and feel if you use the bookmark.
Right. It won't show up in your table of contents, but it gives you an opportunity to cross-link through your document without having it be, a heading.
Hey, Karen, before you get to the next section, so Peter's asking if you can import a PDF into a Google Word doc and mark it up more easily than in using Adobe PDF.
I'm going to have to call a lifeline on this one. My initial answer would be no. When I try to import a PDF into Google, I get the text, but the formatting is not awesome. So Google isn't, as far as I know, prepared to do markup in a PDF document, but I might just open it up to anyone else if they have a different experience.
So but if you brought a PDF into Google, you would get the text. You wouldn't get any notations or annotations.
Yeah, it's really more if you want to be able to copy text out. It's not awesome. I mean, the formatting is not great. It's really more just a matter of, I want to have this document in text form. And it does have to be text searchable before you can do that. It has to have, it can't be a picture.
Yeah,
PDF that's just a picture of a document. I would say this is not a feature that Word has. Would be what I would say. It's not the best use of Google. Google doesn't really, for what I know, unless there's some sort of add-on, the main features of Google doesn't really do that. There's Bluebeam is another way, a software that you can use to edit PDFs, but as far as I know, Google's not there yet. So Track changes. I get this asked this question a lot. People really like this in Word, and you can do it in Google Docs. And so I'm going to talk about that. So in Google Docs, it's called suggesting mode, and you can do both adding suggested changes and also comment. And where you start is over here on the top right of your icon bar. There's this little pencil icon. And so this pencil icon means you're currently in editing mode. So it's just going to be editing as normal, but you can change this to suggesting mode. And I've already made a few, and I can just kind of show you what this is like. It's very much like track changes, where it shows that I've deleted this word, and then over here on the right, a little bubble pops up and indicates that I made this change, and then someone else could come in and reply to it, or this isn't showing very well, make this a little bigger, but someone else can accept or reject it if they have edit rights to the document. But all of this history, and also comments, same thing. And comments are really easy. Basically, you select some text, and you can right click and choose comment. And it's this kind of red cross looking icon, if you will. It's there. It's also up in your menu bar here. So pretty easy to add comments. And here's one that was added earlier. And the history of comments is available here in this little speech bubble icon, where you can see kind of a history of comments that were added, resolved, etc. And one thing that is kind of nice to know is if you want to call somebody's attention in a comment, you can use @. So add in their email address, and as you start typing in their email address, let's do, yeah, you just start typing, and you can see that I get options just like if I were typing in an email, and you can select somebody, and then it makes a link to them. And I believe, and maybe Leo, you can help me out, does it notify them when that happens, when you've mentioned them in a comment?
Yes, they get an email, and I believe they get any updates also to that comment.
Can you add two commenters in the same comment?
As many as you want. I mean,
oh, okay.
Andrea could come in here and add comments. Anyone who has edit rights to the document can kind of add to this thread. And any document can have as many editors and commenters as you give permissions to, essentially.
So I have a question. Can you lock that document, though, into editing so you can always see the changes without having to go back into history?
So I wouldn't say, I'm not the history right here. The comments and suggestions will stay there until they're resolved.
Okay.
Yeah, so these will always be here on the right-hand side until, somebody goes in and says, yes, this has been resolved, and it's gone. And I can even, oops, I was hoping I could undo, but that's not what happened. Maybe you can't undo resolving a comment. Oh well, I learned something new. So these will stay here until they're resolved, and if you want to see the resolved comments or all comments, they are here. So I don't know if that answered the question.
Yeah, so let's say I have the document, I started it, everybody's made their changes and edits and stuff. Can I see the original document versus the edited final version? Yes.
Okay. Yeah, let me answer that. And yeah, great. Thank you, Andrea, for reposting the link to the documents I'm working on. So yeah, if you want to see what it's going to look like to get rid of all of these suggested comments, and what I would say is watch this line right here.
Yeah.
This is what's going to change. I'm going to go from suggested to viewing mode, and okay, and then it takes me to the top of the document. That's what table of contents is for. So what it's done is basically shown you the document before any edits or comments have been added. So it shows like the latest. Yeah, well, the accepted are still going to be in there. If a change was accepted, it'll be in here. But if there are any current unresolved comments or changes, that's what view mode will show you. It's going to show you what it looks like to to not have any of those. And if you view share a document, if you share a document with somebody with only view access, this is all they'll see. They won't have the ability to add comments or suggestions, and they will not see any comments or suggestions. They'll only see sort of the final document as it is, which is basically any comments that have, any suggestions that have been accepted. And kind of, if you were to not accept any of the suggestions, that's what it would look like. Hopefully that's.
So while we're still on comments, so the question is, can you send comments to a subgroup of the people who have rights to see the document, or does it always go to everybody?
So I would say if you don't want people to see the comments, you would give them view access. If you want them, if people can, with comment access, can both make comments and see comments.
Okay.
So you would give them view access if you don't want them to see comments.
Could you use that feature to add people if, like, I just want it, well, they'll still see it though, that I've called something out?
It's pretty much at the document level. You can't like just give somebody, edit rights to this one section.
Just that section. Okay. Hope that helped.
So now I have to, figure out how to get
go back to where you were.
To editing mode, which you can get to from the view mode. It's there and it's also here, but if you go into view, it looks like it collapses that icon. So it's good to know how to get to things from multiple places. One other thing I want to point out, Google is rolling out new stuff all the time. This isn't too new. I haven't used it, but under tools, there is a compare documents feature. I guess it is new enough that they have a new button there. I don't know if people have used it, but it's kind of a cool to know that they have that, because I know that's something that I used a lot when I was using Word. And Leo wanted to point out that you can reopen comments that were resolved. If somebody resolved your comment and you don't think it has been, it's kind of like an IT ticket. You can reopen it, reopen the thread. So as we're talking about track changes, these are if you want to visibly see, in real time, what changes people are suggesting. But even without track changes, Google does an automatic version history of the document. And so you can see the history of edits that were made, whether or not they were done in track changes, any edit that anybody made. And you can either do that by clicking here where it says all changes saved in Drive. It's also under File, Version History. And I'll just show you what that looks like. So here you'll see dates and you'll see people who were making edits to the document at those dates. And if you want to, I think what I can do, let's see, is open this up and show you kind of like micro edits. If I click on what Leo did, I might have to scroll down to find it. Might be easier to, these are like individual, very, very small changes. It's probably easier to just look at the changes for the document itself over a period of time. And so here you can see changes that were made and who made them. And basically just scroll through the document and you can see the edits that were made. Like yesterday, there were probably a lot of edits made. So it's helpful because you can see who made it, what they did, and then you can open up a particular set of edits, like a date and time, and get much more kind of granular. So if you at any time say, you know what, this was a better version, I want to keep that, you can actually make a copy of a prior version. So in case you need to, roll back or you want a record of it, that's there.
Is there a rollback feature?
There used to be, there is not anymore. It used to be that it would basically give you the ability to say,
go back.
But really all it was, make this version the current version. So you wouldn't lose any of the interim steps. It just, I think, got to be too complicated for people to understand. And so they just decided to let you go back and get a copy of what things look like at a point in time. So I am going to move on to Google Sheets. Name versions. Name versions, so under version history, there is something called name current version. And I think you can do it in the version history itself to choose one and say, you know, I want to, oh, sorry about that. I want to name this version. Let me make my screen a little bigger because I had a, I want to name this version. And maybe I want to name this version the March 18th version, something like that. This will be available to anyone with edit rights to the document. And that's a good point. Only people with edit rights have the ability to see the version history. You would name a version if you're working on like a fairly official document and you want to kind of signpost in time, this is sort of where we were at such and such, you know, version 5, and you want the version 5 to be an official thing. We do it occasionally with some of our kind of more important documents. It's probably not something you'll use on a regular basis, but it's good to be able to go back to a particular, and then you can show only named versions. So that way, if there are points in time you want to remember, you don't have to like scroll back through, you know, a whole bunch of different versions to kind of jump back through the history.
And can you name that? That's a blank field, so you can name it anything you want.
Whatever you want, as far as I can tell. I mean, there may be some character limit, but
yeah, very cool. Did not know that was there. So you're going to go to Sheets, or?
Yeah, so I'm going to go to Sheets. And so those of you who have documents open, I'm going to jump over to this Google Sheet. And the reason I'm going to do that is it allows me to kind of follow along in the document what I'm going to cover, and then kind of really show you in real time in the actual software. So again, there's similar features and in format tools that should have been to Google Docs, but you know, to Google Docs and also to Excel. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So some of the differences between Sheets and Docs is that you can add comments, but you don't have that track changes. That track changes isn't available here. There is version control, so the same thing we just saw. You have that version history. It's a slightly harder because you can't get into the nitty gritty. It'll show you like what cells change and things like that. I would say it's not quite as granular, but it is there. And again, if somebody totally hoses your document, you can rescue it from a prior version. And yeah, so that edit history again is up here, clicking here or under File, either way. And so comments are a little different. You can right click to add a comment as before. It's going to put like a little yellow corner. And if you hover over it, it'll give you this. It will also show you in the tab that something has a comment and kind of highlight it. So it's a little less visible, I would say, than Docs, probably because it would get really crowded in a spreadsheet to try and see all of that. But that's just good to know. You can do that if needed. So, you know, you have these tabs or sheets at the bottom, and similar to your headings, each one of these sheets has its own URL. And so, again, it's going to be your sheet name. Again, you've got this URL up here, which is the unique identifier, unique location of your Google Sheet. And then if I click here, this is going to take me to another sheet. And that's just demonstrating that this is a kind of its own URL. So if you want to send somebody directly to a sheet, you can do that. Another kind of cool feature you may not be aware of is you can send somebody directly to a cell or a range of cells. So if I click on this, you can see it says, you know, ID blah, blah, blah. That's telling me go to this sheet and go to this range. And if I click on that, it's taking me directly to this cell. And the way you do that is right click, get linked to the cell, or if you'd had multiple columns or cells highlighted, it would get a link to the range, and when you landed there, that whole range would be highlighted. So if you're trying to get, you know, your colleague to look at, you know, you're trying to describe where it is on this sheet in B5, it's easier to just like send them directly to it. So similar formatting as before, you know, you can hover over the icons to see what's available. Most of it probably looks fairly familiar if you're used to Excel. You know, you can do quick formatting, $, you can customize formatting of numbers, you know, anything, anything you want really in terms of dates and numbers and, you know, that sort of thing. You can wrap or rotate your text. And, you know, in general, the functions are fairly similar. And there's a list of, I put a link here, but under help, you can also find the function list. And it's pretty extensive. In this list, you can search for something like if you were looking for, you know, range or array or something like that, you can type in your keyword here, or you can also narrow it down by, you know, I just want financial functions or, you know, text functions or what have you. So pretty extensive, and there's pretty good help in each of these little learn mores to help you. And just like I think in Excel, if you start to put in your function, it will tell you what needs to go in the different criteria that need to go into it. And there's a link to learn more as that pops up. So Sheets has, you know, you can do charting. This is, if the menu bar gets a little full, these items get in this little more 3 little dots. So if you ever think you're missing an icon, it's probably there. So charting, you can do filtering and sorting. You can do pivot tables. You can filter by condition or by values. So you can choose a value here, or you can filter a condition, let's say text starts with or greater than, that kind of thing. So that's kind of a nice thing to know how to do. And one thing I'm going to introduce is something called filter views. I think a lot of people don't know about this. It's a fairly new feature. You do have this URL here that is for the document. And if someone else wants to be in the document and I come over here and I say, I just want to see, you know, this list, somebody else comes in the document and that's what they're going to see. So in order to deal with that, there's this function called filter views. This is under data. And basically, if you go to filtered views under data and you create a new filter, this gets its own URL up here. Again, it's after the, you know, name of the document. There's this like extra bit that basically says, I'm on this sheet and here's my filter view ID. So what this means is you can do whatever you want here and sort and filter, and no one will see it. We'll see what you're doing. I mean, if you make edits, it will, the edits will show up, but any sorting or filtering that you do will be kind of in that view, and it won't impact people who want to see the whole document. So I've created a filter view that I call topics. And it shows kind of what we just showed before. There's a name for this filter view. It has its own URL. So if you wanted to show somebody, you know, a pared down version of a sheet, you could create and send them this link to the filter view. They are public. They aren't private views. So, you know, whatever is here under data filter views, anyone with edit access to the document, I think, has access to this. And this doesn't impact the people who have the document open. If you have it open, you might be able to see that you are still seeing the full kind of set of rows. And you just close it here, and you're back to normal view. I am going to throw out a lifeline for this next question. Which is, can we customize the toolbar icon? And I am not aware of being able to customize the toolbar icon, but perhaps someone else has done this, or maybe there's an add-on to allow you, because normally you kind of right-click and go into customize. Does anyone else know if there's a way to add more icons to the bar? I guess what I would say is, yeah, go ahead.
The way I know is to use, with app scripts, you could add menus, but
okay.
I don't know of ways to change the icons.
Okay. I think my workaround for that would be to learn the shortcut keys for stuff, whether that's adding rows, etc. I find that's the way I do things more quickly. So, you know, bringing up the keyboard shortcuts, you can even search for the one you're looking for. So that's a great question, but yeah, there isn't an easy way. So other options you have is conditional formatting. Probably familiar with that, and you can, you know, conditionally format things on values, or if you're familiar with that, you know, that works pretty much the same as it does in Excel. If you're not, and sounds like something you'd be interested, like every time a number is higher than 10 to make it red or something like that, you can use that to do that. There's data validation. So if you want to always have a column, for example, people can only put in a certain number of values. You can either type those in or have it refer to a range of cells somewhere where you give those values. You can name ranges, and basically what that means is you have a range of cells somewhere, you select it and you name it. And you can then call that range instead of having to say, you know, G29 through 33. And that might be the place where you have your drop-down list for data validation, for example. Definitely keyboard shortcuts. I recommend learning some of those. They do make your life go a little faster. Another kind of interesting thing I literally just learned, because I did not know this was available, is something called split text to columns. And the reason that I find this helpful is a lot of times you might be pulling in data into sheets or, you know, Excel or whatever, and it's in text format or CSV or something, and it's not formatting very well, and everything's in like one long blob in one column. And so this, I'll give you an example under data. I think I can do it here. I think I have to do it under data. Split text to columns means that when I do that, I say these are spaces in between. It now moved protect and sheet into two different columns. So if you had like a whole bunch of words that were separated by spaces and you wanted each of those to be in a separate column, that's kind of a cool way to do it. And I think this is available in Excel as well, but you can group rows and columns. So you see this little plus over here. This is kind of like a collapse. So I can open it and close it. You basically would select, you know, a couple of columns or however many you want, or rows. And oh, I think I have to figure out where it is. It's under data. And then you can group, and then you get this little collapse and expand. And that's kind of nice because it's a lot easier than hiding and unhiding. It's a lot faster, especially if it's the same number of rows or columns, the same set of rows and columns. And it allows you to just like focus on the stuff you really want and all that really important data that you don't need to look at all the time. You can kind of get that out of the way temporarily. So hopefully folks are still following along. I am happy to answer any other questions about sheets or sheets at this point, since we're still here, before I kind of move back to some kind of final comments on integrations and stuff.
Can I ask you a pivot table question?
I can try to answer it. You're welcome.
Okay. No, it's not for this session, but I think it's always been on my bucket list to really learn pivot tables. I'm not quite even sure why I want to learn them, other than I know they're cool. So can you come up with a session for us maybe someday on pivot tables and why we need them?
Yeah, I think maybe just maybe more advanced features of Excel, like people's favorite functions, and, you know, pivot tables could be in there. I would say kind of just generally I didn't put like numbers in this data, but one of the reasons you would use pivot table is to sort of collapse down a set of information. And so if, for example, I wanted a list of just the topics and I didn't want to have to keep sorting this, I might do a pivot table that called this column and, you know, just said where it's not blank, and then I would end up with a list of topics. Or if I wanted to add up, add up some values that were all, all had the same thing in one of the columns. It's kind of hard to describe without having data to demonstrate, but it's a way to sort of summarize or group a larger set of data down to kind of like a more manageable data set that you can, add criteria to filter it and, group it the way you want to. So it's pretty powerful, but it's kind of a little out of scope of explaining this. So I see that people have comments about mail merge. I do have somebody who's offered to do mail merge. So maybe we could do kind of an advanced section that talks about those. And then, yeah, some shortcut keys to kind of, for managing columns. There's some stuff in the chat about that. And I see there's a question about freeze frames. So basically there's freeze, and so it works similar. And so if I wanted to, right now I have the top column frozen, and so if I scroll around, that top column stays. But maybe I want the first 3 columns and the first 5 rows to be frozen. I would come to freeze and say up to current row and up to current column, and it's kind of a similar feature. You kind of have to do rows and columns separately, but yeah, hopefully that answers that question. And we can try and add the shortcuts to the outline. There's what I would say though with shortcuts is there are a lot of shortcuts under help here, and so that's a much more, I would say, comprehensive list, and you can search that list for things that you want to be able to do.
I think we should pull some of these together and then look at, an advanced class of some sort.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, what I wanted to do is kind of bridge the gap of, people who probably haven't used this before, and then maybe expand that to help people be productive, by learning some of the things that they may be familiar with in the Microsoft world. So I'm going to move back over to my doc. And just kind of comment on a few other things that you can do. And one of them is you can actually, and maybe I'm just gonna hop over here to give an example. Let's say I wanted to grab this stuff right here, probably maybe just these 2 columns, and hit copy. And I just did the right click to copy. And I wanted to paste it in. I can do that right here. And it asked me, do you want it? So I did Control V, sorry, or Command V to do paste, but you can also do it from the edit menu. I am asked if I want to link to the spreadsheet. Now I can paste on linked, and then it's just going to be, your regular kind of little table, or I can paste it linked. And what that means is now if it tells me that it's linked, and I can kind of update it, if it needs to be updated, but it kind of stays linked. So if I want this to always have the same content from that spreadsheet, that's kind of a nice thing. You can embed stuff into Google. You can do it be it from a Google Sheet or a slide. And then we did kind of touch on the fact that there are scripts. This is under tools. This is super advanced, but there are scripts that can extend the features of docs and sheets and probably other Google files. Other extensions that are a little less involved because they're already developed are things like add-ons. And so one of the add-ons that I have for Google Docs is called Markdown Tools. And what this allows you to do is have kind of numbering, automatic numbering when you're doing headings. So if you want each heading to have a number and subheadings to be kind of numbered in this 1.2.3, you can do that, and you don't have to manually kind of add and update that. So that's one tool. Google Sheets has a couple that I like. and one of them, speaking on mail merge, is called Yet Another Mail Merge. I'm just going to jump over there, same place. It's under add-ons. And so that allows you to do a mail merge with between data in a sheet and email or docs. And then what I like, it seems kind of silly, but it's called crop data. You'll start to notice that when you open up a sheet, like add a new sheet to your Google Sheet, it's got like 1,000 rows and like, I don't know, 30 columns or something. And that's a little sometimes overwhelming. And so this basically says, you know, you can crop to the data or selection, and this just gets rid of all those. And you can certainly always add more rows and right click to add more columns. So other tools, and you know, these are sheets and docs. Google also has slides, which is sort of the online version of PowerPoint. Again, transfer between PowerPoint and slides is pretty good. I would say the masters part is a little maybe less developed, and you know, images might not come in quite as well, so not quite as good as Word, but it is pretty nice. I do all my presentations in slides, and then also Google Sites for kind of the website. And all of these can be managed in your Drive like regular files. Whew, so that's all I had. Any other comments or questions?
Hey, Karen, this is Andrea. I wanted to just mention for the group, I was racking my brain, like my favorite tip. And I think that one of my very favorite tips is to add a Google file in multiple locations.
Yes.
So the whole Shift-C. So if you want to demonstrate that, I use that all the time. It's a great, great feature.
Yeah, so this is more of a Drive tip, but what Andrea is talking about is if you have, say this, well, this is not a good, you cannot do it in team drives. You have to go to sort of your standard drive. But if I had...
So you mean my drive, Karen?
Yeah, so in your drive, not in shared drives, but in your drive, a document can live in more than one location.
Did not know that.
So it can live in 2 or 3 or whatever. If I click on this document and I look at my details over here, it tells me where it's located. It's located in my drive. And if I kind of share this into another location, it's the same document. The URL stays the same. It doesn't really change anything except that it can be in multiple locations. The only complication is if you share it to a location with different permissions, it's going to kind of gather any new permissions. So yeah.
Why would I do this if it's only in my drive?
So I figured out how to explain this quickly, but so shared drives is, these are specifically, they're called shared drives because they have a different framework than anything in my drive. You can still share files and folders in my drive. Things are still shared there, but shared drives is a very specific framework that's actually, no one owns the files there, the lab owns it. And it has much more, it's a much more limited environment in terms of what you can do.
So I should go take the Drive class is what you're talking about.
You should take the Drive class to understand, but basically what Andrea is saying is if I use my Alt key and I drag this file, it makes this little plus. And you can do it, you know, if you have this expanded, you can move it to a folder here. But if I wanted to, you know, I can move this to another place, and I'll show you what happens if I go now into this subfolder. There it is. And now it says untitled document, sorry, but that's what I had. But if I click on it now, you'll see it's in 2 locations over here under the details on the right-hand side. So it's the same file, it's one file. It's not 2 copies of the file. If I make one edits, they'll show up everywhere. But it is kind of nice because sometimes, you know, you have something that has multiple topics and you want it in multiple places. The only limitation is that it's only got to be within the Drive environment. It can't be in the shared Drive environment, which is specifically items that are kind of have a stronger kind of set of a rigorous kind of framework. So it's not available there. But it is kind of nice because sometimes you're like, I don't know where to file this. Well, you can file it in both places. And if you want to know where it is, you can always find out under details.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, and the other thing you can do is if you move it back onto itself is one way. Like if you decide you don't want it, looks like you might be able to just hit one of these X's, I guess. I haven't, yes. So you can, if you decided you didn't want it somewhere, it looks like you can just hit this X and then it will only live in.
Before we go, Karen, we have one urgent question because it's a great one. If a file or folder is shared, can somebody else who shared it change the name on you?
Yes. If they have edit rights, they can change the name. It's not going to change the link or the URL, but someone with edit rights can change the name.
Okay, Gwyneth. So we're saying share only with people we like, huh? And trust.
Be careful. Yeah, you can always take their permissions away.
Yeah,
and you can see under activity what was done to a document.
And who did it?
Yep.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So under untitled, you can see I created this item. I mean, not much has happened, but you can see if somebody edited the document or moved it or renamed it or something. You would see that there.
Great.
Cool.
We're at our time. So Karen, thank you very much for doing this. We have recorded it. We are, Karen was our first volunteer doing something like this. We'd like to start a web page so that we can have lab training by lab people and have them all in one location. So if there's another topic that, either you can teach or somebody else can teach or have an idea for topics, please share with us, all right, so that we can use our time wisely to get in as much training that we never have time for during a regular time. So
Great.
Appreciate everybody. Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Andrea.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.